can do that. Morning. Words by Marilyn Falkowski. We welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons, to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. My name's Dave Cook. I'm the service coordinator for today. If you're new to North Chapel, welcome. If you're visiting, please consider signing the guest book at the back of the sanctuary. We have hearing assistance devices and large print versions of the hymns and order of service on the back table. Monica will be leading a spiritual exploration this morning.
With Chloe.
With Chloe, okay. After the service, we invite you to meet with us downstairs, to visit with each other in the social hall, where there's coffee, or you can also, of course, meet here, talk here. There is a, announcement in the order of service. Been asked to emphasize, if I can find one, there it is. And that is the Easter flower donations. Please consider donating in memory of a special loved one. So contact Ann Winya. Her email is in the order of service.
I have one announcement.
And now is the time to put your cell phone in worship mode. The theme this month is regeneration, coming fully alive. These are the words of Howard Thurman, theologian and a mentor of Martin Luther King when he was at Boston University. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Recently, I was reading a New Yorker article about Göbekli Tepe, a vast complex of Stonehenge-style megalithic circles in the countryside of what is now southern Turkey. The following description is from that article. It may seem like a digression, but bear with me. There are a number of unusual things about Göbekli Tepe. It's estimated to be 11,000 years old, 6,500 years older than the Great Pyramid, 5,500 years older than the earliest known cuneiform texts, and about 1,000 years older than the walls of Jericho. The site comprises more than 60 multi-ton T-shaped limestone pillars, most of them engraved with bas-reliefs of lions and foxes, boars, vultures, scorpions, spiders, and snakes. The site has yielded no traces of habitation, no trash pits, no water source, no houses, no hearths, no roofs, no domestic plant or animal remains, and is therefore believed to have been built by hunter-gatherers who used it as a religious sanctuary. The idea of a religious monument built by hunter-gatherers contradicts most of what we thought we knew about religious monuments and about hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers are traditionally believed to have lacked complex symbolic systems, social hierarchies, and the division of labor, three things you probably need before you can build a 22-acre megalithic temple. Formal religion, meanwhile, is supposed to have appeared only after agriculture produced such hierarchical social relations as required a cosmic backstory. So the findings at Göbekli Tepe suggest that we have the story backward, that it was actually the need to build a sacred site that first obliged hunter-gatherers to organize themselves as a workforce, to spend long periods of time in one place, to secure a stable food supply, and eventually to invent agriculture. So that kind of need and that kind of drive to produce a sacred site is something that 13,000 years later at North Chapel we have here, that modern day humans need, that modern day humans have therefore built and maintained so that we may replenish our spirit and express our beliefs about the world. In other words, as Howard Thurman might say, to help us find our path to come alive. We will now have a brief time of meditation.
So I have a sorrow and an overwhelming joy this morning that is wildly irreverent, triumphant, and fantastically offensive. Please forgive me. I hope this is okay if I share it. I promise there's a method to the madness. 18 years ago, at a wonderful gathering that took place right here in Vermont, I saw flying proudly the beautiful state bird of New Jersey. It was not the American goldfinch, as wonderful as that bird is. The state bird that I'm referring to has to do with an often vulgar gesture of the hand. It's the kind commonly used in sign language that is familiar to all of us. It was not this, which means I love you. But strangely, it functioned in the same way. Do you have a sense of what I'm saying? I can tell. Okay. Used correctly, this state bird can be a blessing and a prayer. Okay, so long story short, Years ago, my dear friend Keith was in a tragic accident. It was serious. He severed his spine and lost the use of the lower half of his body. Years after the accident, a big group of our friends gathered up here in Vermont for a reunion. The youth group was getting back together again. This was not YRUU that Megan referred to earlier, but YRUU stands for Young Religious Unitarian Universalists. And it became a joke among us older LRYers. LRY stood for Liberal Religious Youth. I'll get to that. Anyway, the bunch of us were gathering up here in Vermont. A few of us had seen Keith in his wheelchair, so it was hard. He's very different now than he was back in the day. And this new state of things made us sad and nervous, although we feigned otherwise. We didn't get away with it at all. Keith is very smart, and the group of us are collectively very bad at dishonesty. Still, one by one, we greeted him as we arrived on that summer morning so awkwardly. And not too long after breakfast, it was time for our opening circle, a ritual gathering marking the official beginning of our time together. My good friend Hank, who's a minister now, my good friend Hank, who is dear to Keith, stepped up to offer the opening words, and he said, and these were his words precisely, "Can we all please stand and gather round?" He was standing right next to Keith when he said this. Can we all please stand? And there were audible gasps. Hank can be foolish and brash and funny, but this time we were horrified. Keith couldn't stand like the rest of us. He's wheelchair bound. So we were horrified, all of us were. And an anxious hush fell over the room, and there was a hollowness in our hearts and a cavernous emptiness. What a terrible way for our great reunion to begin. And into that very silence, however, bravely, Hank said, looking down into the eyes of his beloved Keith, our friend, he said, "Good God, I remember you being so much taller than you are today." That was when I saw it. The beautiful state bird of New Jersey. The state where Keith and I, and so many of us, are from. It was the prettiest bird I've ever seen, wildly irreverent, triumphant, and fantastically offensive. And Keith let that good bird fly so boldly right in Hank's loving face until we all got over ourselves. Shattered from our pretenses by a blessing, by a gesture of deepest friendship and holy love, and by a sacred thing that brings us back to life. Thank you, Hank, for your fearlessness and hope, and for your healthy ministry of all of us. Quote, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that, because the world needs people who have come alive." Howard Thurman, the author of The Living Wisdom of Howard Thurman, a visionary for our time. And so I ask you, friends, what is it that makes you come alive? Is it music? Or meditation? Is it the state bird of New Jersey? I wonder how Reverend Howard Thurman would have connected with my friend Hank. I think that they would have deeply loved each other. Now, do you know about Howard Thurman? Not everyone knows his name. Howard Washington Thurman was an American author, a theologian. He was a leader of a movement, one of the leaders in the movement for civil rights, and he played a leading role in many social justice movements and organizations in the 20th century. So his thumbnail reads on his Wikipedia page. According to Taylor Branch, Howard Thurman was among the triumvirate, one of the three leading Negro preachers of the time, with Vernon Johns and Mordecai Johnson from Paris, Tennessee. Martin Luther King, who was 30 years Howard's junior, claims him as an influence. "Keep afresh before me," Howard Thurman would say. "Keep afresh before me the moments of my high resolve." Thurman was a mystical and progressive theologian. Martin King was only a child when Howard Thurman led a delegation of African Americans on a 6-month journey through India. They met with religious leaders from all around the world. Mahatma Gandhi was there and among them. And Gandhi asked Thurman persistent, pragmatic questions about the Black community and its struggles. Together, they spoke of a principle called satyagraha. And through this principle, they laid the groundwork for what became the nonviolent strategies of the civil rights movement. Satyagraha is a Sanskrit word. It's a compound word in two parts. Satya means truth, and agraha, which is insisting or holding firm. Satyagraha translates as truth force. It's powerful. Through Thurman, the living bond between Gandhi and Martin King is obvious. Quote, when Thurman asked Gandhi what message he would like to take back to the United States, Gandhi said that he regretted not having made the nonviolence more visible as a practice worldwide, and remarked, quote, it may be through the Negroes that the unadulterated message of nonviolence will be delivered to the world. Vital charge. And so again, I ask you, what is it that makes you come alive? Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. Today is Friday, June 23rd in 2006. And this is the first day of our reunion for our summer gathering up here in Vermont. We gather now to recognize and to celebrate the 20 years that have passed since we gathered together as LRYers back in the 1980s. My, how things have changed. So began our reunion back in the day, my sorrow and great joy this morning. That took place 17 years ago. 50 or 60 of us gathered from across the country to celebrate having participated in the youth group of the Unitarian Universalist Church. LRY is what we called it, which stood for Liberal Religious Youth, or stood for Leftover Raspberry Yogurt, or stood for Little Red Yo-Yos, or for Love Reaches You, depending on how seriously we wanted to take the world at the time. Obviously, though, today is not that day. Would that I can convince us otherwise. It is, however, Sunday, the nearest day of the 1st of April, so happy April Fool's Day. Foolishness can be a holy thing. Today is Sunday, April the 2nd. It is Palm Sunday in the Christian tradition, and the title of this morning's reflection is Coming Back to Life, well suited for early spring and for us. It is a reflection about finding faith after tragedy, like the one we just saw in Nashville. So there's a story of a man who prayed a lot, seemingly always, and another man, a young journeyman, a minister who was new along the path. He came upon this praying man with a question. He said, "Excuse me, my good brother, may I ask something of you? Why is it that you are praying all of the time?" And the praying man responded. He said, "I do not pray always, even though I truly wish that I could." He said, "I do pray often. Have you seen me while I was in prayer?" And the young journeyman said, Yes, I see you praying as the sun rises on my morning walk to work. And again, I see you praying as it sets on the far horizon when I'm coming home. Some days I come home early for lunch, and each time I pass, I see you praying. It seems to me that you pray all the time. Is that not true?" And the praying man said, "No, it is not true. I do not pray all the time, but I do pray often. So I'm not surprised that you believe that I always pray. In truth, I am just consistent, not constant. I pray those 3 times and at 2 others." "Why do you pray so often? Why do you pray 5 times a day?" the journeyman asked. "Because we so easily forget, my friend," the praying man responded. "Because so quickly we forget the holy gift." "Are you a Muslim?" the journeyman asked. "In my studies, I've learned that this is their tradition." And their conversation continued there for a while, but I don't recall the rest. The story ends before we find out the specific details. It is the Muslim tradition to pray 5 times a day at fixed times every day. Fajr is the prayer that takes place at daybreak. Zuhar is the prayer that takes place as sunset passes over its highest point. Asr begins at a calculated time between the sun's zenith and its setting. Maghrib happens soon after sunset, and Isha soon after dusk. 5 prayers. This is one way of praying, but it is not the only way. There are many ways of praying, many ways of remembering the holy, and it is not only Muslim tradition that holds that we should pray so intensely. In fact, St. Augustine said that when we sing, we pray twice. And it was Paul's letter to the Thessalonians in which he suggested that we pray without ever ceasing. A prayer is an appeal for a blessing, a holy gift, a gesture of grace. It is an act of calling a little piece of heaven down to earth. Patty Cathcart sings it so beautifully. She sings, "What are you waiting for? Believe in me." Isn't it love in this life that you need? And you can offer your soul on an altar of sacrifice, but give your heart to me. Let's bring heaven down here. Let's bring heaven on down. I don't want to wait for the angels. Let's bring heaven down here. It is a loving prayer, but prayer comes in many shapes and sizes. Other traditions have different ways of calling blessings down to earth. As a seminarian in Unitarian Universalism, I learned to sing a song of blessing back in 2004, and I've been singing it without ever ceasing for 19 years now. I learned this song from a vibrant and barrel-chested man named John Berquist. He was a beautiful man, died a few years ago, but his music lives on in me, and I carry him and others as precious and as powerful in the melody every time. When I sing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Can you sing that with me? Call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down. Beauty above us, beauty below us, beauty around us and between us. So call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call down a blessing, call. This is one of our ways, but it's hardly the only one. And when I say it's one of our ways, I don't mean that I learned this song from a Unitarian, from the Unitarian tradition. I just learned it from a beloved elder in the context of Unitarianism. It was in a church in Chicago. I don't know who technically holds the spiritual copyright, if there is such a thing. What I know is that my spirit moves when I sing it. I'm moved in a way that is larger than me, in a way that feels like it belongs to the sacred river that moves us all. Now, I don't mean to impose this experience on anyone, and I only want to share with you that singing Call Down a Blessing feels just like prayer to me. It is a special feeling, more than the song, that makes me feel connected. There are many ways of singing, of praying, of blessing one another with gifts. You may recall a story that I shared before about the woman who cried out for blessings in the middle of the open meadow. Do you remember that story? She was in the middle of an open meadow and she sang, "Blessings come." And my minister friend, his name is Bill Clark, saw this happening in front of him and wondered to himself, we discreet Unitarians, what would we be like if we stood out in the open green and just said, "Blessings come," at the top of our lungs, and expected something, not just as a flash mob kind of thing, but earnestly, what would happen? And he wondered about this for a while and saw her do it again. She sang, "Blessings come," even louder, and nothing happened and nothing changed. And the third time that she cried out, her prayers were answered. The seas did not part, the skies did not open, and the flooding rains did not fall torrentially. The hand of God did not come down from the clouds and touch the faithful woman on her cheek. But out from the thick wilderness and out from the dense forest that surrounded the meadow sprang a 90-pound, playful and spirited, golden retriever, the dog for which the woman in the meadow had been searching. Blessings was the name of her dog. Her golden, her faithful companion, as it were. Finding her beloved Blessings was an answer to her prayer. Now, if one were to ask, was this answer a secular answer or a sacred one? I can only respond by saying that reasonable people can disagree. One thing that we can all agree upon, though, when blessings come out from the wilderness, when grace reveals itself from out the greatest mysteries of life, it makes us feel that we have come alive. It's that time of year again. The crocuses and the daffodils, the tulips and the red clover are pushing up through the snow to greet the brand new day. It is the time of year when we come alive again, even especially amidst the challenges that we face. Tragedy unfolds again in Nashville. I won't quote the numbers of shootings in this country since the new year began from the chancel of this church today. I will only recognize that no single house of faith, no single faith alone can handle this much tragedy in a single service. Painters cannot paint it, poets can't get there with beauty, only bitterness, fierceness can touch it. Simple prayer is not good enough to console a broken family. The poet cries out in anger, soul-crushed, punch-drunk, swinging recklessly as if at blind faith itself. Muhammad is pacing when he isn't kneeling. Jesus can't talk because he's too busy weeping. Yahweh is a mother who cries at the ceiling. If only they knew how good it could have been. It's the Day of Atonement, 2004. Would Jesus be happy we evened the score? You hypocrites and bullies who profit from war, may gods all spit on your graves. And I say, all of you gods, tell your squabbling children, whatever their color or call, they can all go to hell if there is such a place. Go to hell. Have it out. Have a ball. Dana Kurtz is the courageous poet, the artist, bittersweet and broken, who wrote these lines and sings them. What do you think she's doing? Why do artists rage? Because perhaps they preserve in us a certain tenacity that we need to resist, to insist upon the truth, to cleave to it. A bitter grace that is stronger than violence, that outweighs sorrow and grief and even death. I see such artists as brave stewards of peaceful souls somehow, even as our horrifying pretenses, even as their art resists, and even as their art is resisted and criticized and defiled by those of us who are not ready to meet its edges. 5 years ago, Manuel and Patricia Oliver lost their son, Joaquin, or Guac, in Parkland, Florida. You may recall it was the 14th day of February. It was on Valentine's Day. The tragedy unfolded at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School near Miami in the suburb of Parkland, Florida. I was reminded of the three of them, of Joaquin, Manuel, and Patricia, not because of what just unfolded in Nashville, but because Manuel was recently arrested for speaking out against gun violence in Washington, D.C. during a committee meeting. Manuel and Patricia had been fighting ever since they lost their son. And Manuel was tackled by two armed Capitol police officers and held to the ground, face down on a marble floor, resisting, for insisting that we find a way to stop killing children in school. It isn't complicated. Manuel said, I'm sick of going to the Capitol buildings, knocking down doors and explaining with my pain and with our suffering that this is not good. We need to come together seriously. Otherwise, this will vanish like Parkland vanished, like Santa Clarita vanished, like Uvalde vanished. And we cannot allow that to happen. I'm sick of this, and I will do everything that it takes. Everything that it takes. I'm flying to Tennessee tomorrow, by the way. We have an event on Monday morning at 10:30. That would be tomorrow at 11:30 our time. So hold them in your hearts with me, will you? So many of us are asking ourselves, how is it that this keeps happening? What do we need to do to make it stop? And how is it that we have forgotten where we've been? And how can we remember who we are? Sometimes a little bit of distance is all that you need to bring you home. Planning this service earlier this week with David Cook in the library, he spoke of the place in Turkey. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Göbekli Tepe. It is an excavation site that reveals the remains of an ancient civilization that existed 11,000 years ago. If that's true, and if it's true what they say, that we grow old by inches, we may right now be far wiser than we know. How do we call upon that wisdom? A great artist named James Baldwin raised this question years ago. I don't know if he answered the question directly, but I do know that he raised it. He said that he did in an interview that when he was reflecting on a book, the conclusion of the book called Another Country. Baldwin finished this book in Istanbul, in Turkey, a city where he felt a deep connection to human truth. He felt deep roots there, old roots. He felt that these roots were not his roots, but they were roots that were as old as his, and he found in them something true and powerful. The city of Istanbul is 950 kilometers from Göbekli Tepe, and the 11,000-year-old civilization. That's roughly the distance between here and Charlottesville, Virginia, which is relatively close, considering that Istanbul is 7,767 kilometers from here. Baldwin had traveled to Istanbul in order to find his way back home. Sometimes a little bit of distance is all you need. In life, we face great challenges, great choices. Choices of family and career, choices of spiritual and emotional integrity. How we live into these choices and how we survive them is up to us. This is spring, as the crocuses and the daffodils are breaking through the snow, as the tulips and red clover are rising in earth and in us to greet the new day. It's time for us to come alive. Against the odds and against the grain, even amidst the many challenges we face. At the reunion that I mentioned, the reunion that was my candle of joy and sorrow, we can all find ways, perfectly imperfect ways, to overcome the challenges that we face. Life is loving enough. Spirit is loving enough. God and time are loving enough to see us through. Little birdie told me. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Stronger than time that wounds us and that steals from us like a thief is a spirit of life, of joy, of reverence, of irreverence, of triumph, of holy gift that survives in us through the winter and lives into the spring of our lives and the spring of this world. Keep that spirit within you, animated, I hope, by a little chuckle that I pray comes across your face the next time you hear mention of the American goldfinch. May it be so, blessed be, and amen.